the main points of Havdalah that we've seen. It is done on Saturday night. There is a discussion as to whether Havdalah is a mitzvah of Shabbat or a mitzvah of Saturday night. The difference, interestingly enough, is whether women are obligated in Havdalah. If it's a mitzvah of Shabbat, then women are obligated, because all positive time-bound mitzvot of Shabbat, or all mitzvot of Shabbat, positive, negative, women are equally obligated. But if it's a positive time-bound mitzvah that isn't on Shabbat, then women are not obligated. So we'll see women have this status of Safek because of this discussion of whether Havdalah. The other point we saw about Havdalah is that it's not just performed as a mitzvah. It's also seen as a way of bringing in the new week with bracha. And that's going to be emphasized in the halachot. So it's different to a mezuzah. Mezuzah, we just put up a mezuzah. We don't have any other ceremony around the mezuzah as a form of protection. Just as an example, even though there are those who see the mezuzah in that way, we don't have any ceremony for that. Whereas Havdalah is seen as a ceremony of bracha. So starting from 296, so he says the order of Havdalah is what's called Yavne. Yayin, Basamim, Ner, Havdalah. Wine, spices, candle, and then Hamavdil. So that's Yavne, like the place in Israel. And don't use a cup that already has had someone drink from it. Use a fresh cup. That is all the Shulchan Aruch says in the first halacha. There are more adds in quite a lot, and this is where you get this bracha perspective really coming in. He says before Havdalah, we say, and specifically before Havdalah at home, he doesn't list this as being done in Shul, even though we do it here at Shul. This is really the home Havdalah. You start with Hinei al Yeshuati, Kos Yeshua Resa, Le'urimai Ta'ora. Why? He says L'siman Tov is a good sign. We start with verses of redemption and blessing as a good sign for the week ahead. When you're making Havdalah, look at the cup and look at the candles. And then he says the custom is to spill some of the wine from the cup onto the earth before Borei Priagafin. In other words, Baruch Atah Hashem Elokeinu Melech HaOlam, tip, Borei Priagafin. Now you don't do it at the beginning, because then you're making it over a cup that's already had something taken out of it. But you want to pour it. Why? He's going to explain. The reason for the pouring is we say any house which doesn't have wine poured in it like water does not have enough blessing. In other words, to live large and with extravagance. And we do this as a siman tov at the beginning of the week. And we also pour a little bit of water after Havdalah, a little bit of wine after Havdalah to extinguish the candle. Now the Mishna Brura says we don't pour the wine. We don't pour the wine like that during an after Havdalah. What we do is we overflow the cup at the beginning, and that's the much more common thing to do nowadays. Rabbi and Gavi Ziegler's older brother, Aaron Ziegler, used to always bother him because he said he doesn't like the wasting. It's Bal Tashket. And surely you can't justify Bal Tashket just because of bracha. Now the Ramah understands that you can. There's not an ambiguous Shulchan Aruch, but he found one of the Rishonim who said exactly this. We don't pour the wine because we don't waste. Did we discuss that?
No.
Okay. Okay, so that's
there are cultures that do that, but they have like lots of show of things.
Yes. Yeah. So that. So I guess. Yeah, exactly. So that's the idea. Okay. Then he says that you wash your eyes with the Havdalah wine because of love of the mitzvah. So this is not now a siman bracha. This is out of. So
really? Okay.
This is now out of love of the mitzvah. The analogy to this is kissing your tefillin when you put them away. A lot of people, as they take off their tefillin, they kiss them. That's the same kind of thing. Even kissing the Torah. Out of love for the Torah, out of love for the mitzvah, you give it a kiss. That's the idea. Now, why is this the particular way that we show our love for the mitzvah? So I am confident. I haven't seen anything on this. Which I should take up a Hirsch. I'm confident.
The kissing thing.
the wine in the
The
eyes.
wine, yes.
They're putting the wine in your eyes. Why is that wine in your eyes? Where does that come from? I'm confident that it comes from Yaakov's bracha to Yehuda. What does he say? There we go. Asir legefeni raw. He ties his donkey to the vineyard, l'streika benautanor, and to the vine branch, the son of his donkey. So in other words, he's got animals and he's got vineyards. Kives beyain levusho. He washes his clothes in wine, and his mantle in the blood of grapes. Okay. Chachlile einayim miyayin. Sparkling eyes from wine. Ulven shinayim mechalav. And white teeth from milk. So he has these, that's the idea. This idea of these sparkling eyes from wine, that he somehow has this invigoration in his eyes that comes from the wine. So nobody here says it, but I'm convinced that that's, and what else is a connection between wine and eyes? So that's what it seems. He doesn't say anything about putting in your pockets and he doesn't say that. Back to Shulchan. So that was all the Ramor. So you can see Shulchan Aruch just basically puts it straight as a mitzvah, and the Ramor turns it into a bracha ceremony, if I can say. Then the Shulchan Aruch says we can't make Havdalah on bread, because it was made to be over the wine. Kiddush we could make over bread, because Kiddush is made with a meal. Havdalah is not linked to a meal, so therefore you don't have it. But you can make Havdalah over beer if that is the drink of the country. So that's the idea of Chamar Medina. What's the social drink of the country? And then he says, actually other liquids, other beverages as well, except for water. The Ramor says it's better to make Havdalah on wine that's been drunk from, in other words, a not full cup of wine, rather than the other beverage. However, after Pesach, the custom is to make Havdalah on beer because it is dear to you. So firstly is understand what that halacha means, and then we'll ask the contradiction. During Pesach, you couldn't have any beer. Now Pesach's finished, you're allowed to have beer. So now you've got the option to use boring old wine, which you have like all the time during Pesach, or beer, which you've got like a whole week without having any, so you would be much more excited to have on beer. So therefore, after Pesach, we actually make Havdalah on beer because that's what we desire more. And this halacha, he's saying, make on whichever you prefer. And the previous halacha, he said, it's better to be even on a pagum cup of wine, even a cup of wine that's been drunk from, rather than the other beverages. So the Mishna Brura answers the contradiction by saying, if this is a drink which is not a social drink in the country, rather use even drunk wine. If it is a social drink, then that's as good as wine. And if you prefer it, then rather do it on that. That's how the Mishna Brura reads it. And that would explain that many people don't make Havdalah on wine. I mean, I personally don't. Firstly, I don't want wine on a Saturday night after Shabbos. Secondly, grape juice, what I need now, the sugar for. So usually I'll do it on robust tea or coffee or something like that. But there have been times that I've done it on cold drink or other things. So any of those would be acceptable. And really it would be whatever you prefer. Then back to the Shulchan Aruch, he says if Yom Tov falls on Saturday night, so then you've got Kiddush, Kiddush and Havdalah. So he wants to know, can you then make Kiddush on the bread and then make the Havdalah on the bread as well, because you're making Kiddush on the bread as well? And he says it's a machloket. But the Ramor says the main one is that you can actually do, since you're doing Kiddush on the bread, on Yom Tov, you can do that on the bread as well. Okay. Then the Shulchan Aruch asks, what if you don't have any wine or other beverages? So some say you're allowed to then eat because, what can you do? You're supposed to make Havdalah before you eat, but if you don't know, what can you do? And others say, if you can wait, if you think you might have tomorrow, then don't eat tonight and wait until tomorrow. If you only have 1 cup of wine for the whole of Shabbos, oh, no, there's another thing. Okay, another thing. Saturday night, you've got 1 cup of wine and you've got supper. Now, what's the problem? You want to use your cup of wine for Havdalah and you want to use your cup of wine for benching. So he says, so then what you do is you eat without Havdalah and then do benching and Havdalah on that cup of wine. So you can actually, in that case, delay your Havdalah until after you've eaten. But according to those who say that you don't really need a cup of wine for benching, so then make Havdalah first. And he says, obviously, if you can stretch the wine in some way, whether it's by diluting it a little bit or you've got actually a little bit more, so you can just have the line, take a little bit or whatever, then make that plan. If you've got a financial choice between wine for Kiddush or wine for Havdalah, what do you go with?
Kiddush, I'd say, but you can do it on bread anyway.
Exactly, that's the answer. Since you could do Kiddush on bread, so then set the wine aside for Havdalah. If you've only got the choice of wine for Havdalah or a candle for Chanukah, you go with the candle for Chanukah.
Really?
Yeah. Two reasons the Mishna Brura says. One is because it's better to publicize the miracle. And the other one is because the main mitzvah of Havdalah you really fulfill in davening. And this is a secondary mitzvah.
So you don't have Chanukah without the candle.
You don't have Chanukah without the candle. Okay, next halacha. You should say Havdalah sitting. And the Ramah says, some say you should say Havdalah standing, and that's what we do. Now, we've seen this conflict between sitting and standing many times. Beg your pardon. And usually, the difference between the two opinions is the same reason that it's the difference between two opinions. On the one hand, if you're sitting, that's more of a kviyut, that's more of a settledness, especially if it's more than one person making Havdalah. We all sit down around the table to make Havdalah. On the other hand, it's seen as doing more honor to the Havdalah to stand for it. So that's why we have these two different opinions. The Mishnah Brura adds in, if it's a Kiddush and Havdalah together, then everyone agrees you should sit. But if it's just a Havdalah, so like a Saturday night Kiddush, yeah. Kiddush and Havdalah together, then everyone agrees you should sit. But if it's just a Havdalah, our custom is to stand. Then the Shulchan Aruch says, you hold the wine in your right hand, the hadas.
No one sits for Kiddush and Havdalah together.
No one sits for Kiddush and Havdalah together. Yes, because we stand for Kiddush all the time. So I guess it's for those who sit. For those who sit for Kiddush and stand for Havdalah. What do you do when the two are combined? Yeah, it's a good point. Okay, so then he says, okay, so you take the hadas. Now he talks about the basamim as the hadas. And the reason for that is that, just see if we've got okay, great, we've got the Shul's internet again. He speaks about the Havdalah as being the Basamim as being the Hadas. And we're going to see later on that it's actually preferred that you use a Hadas for Havdalah. We'll see that. But he says you hold the wine in your right hand, the Hadas in your left hand. Then you say the Bracha on your wine. Then you swap hands and make the Bracha on the Hadas. And then you put the wine in your right hand again. And the Mishnah Brura says the reason for this is that you should always have the thing over which you're saying the bracha in your right hand. The Rabbi Goldfein, I didn't hear this from Rabbi Goldfein directly, Rabbi Hillel Bernstein, Milnerton told me, the Rabbi Goldfein said to them he didn't do it this way. He kept the wine in his right hand the whole time. Always get the wine in his right hand and then just made the bracha and the other things in his left hand. Could be, I don't remember from what we saw about brachot. I mean, let's say I want to eat an apple. You know, does it have to be that I hold the apple in my right hand, or is it okay if I hold the apple in my left hand? You know, I don't know that people are always strict about it. So, the main thing about Havdalah is I'm the one, Rabbi Goldfein felt that was acceptable. Okay, now he says that when you Okay, now he says that you say the bracha on the hadas, and then you put the hadas down, look at your Brura, and then you look at the fingernails. And this actually relates to the Shir on Shabbat. Of praise. A bracha of benefit, you say before benefit. Because how can you take that benefit without saying the bracha first? A bracha of praise, you say after you have experienced the phenomenon. Because otherwise, on what are you praising?
Yeah.
How does that tie in here? Is that the bracha of Besamim is a bracha of benefit. So we said the bracha before. But they point out that the bracha of the Aish, which I always thought was a bracha of benefit, is not. It's a bracha of praise. And so therefore you say you experience the fire, you experience the reflection of the fire, then you say your bracha. Now no one does that. They point out in the Jewish notes, no one does that, and they. So firstly, I'll just tell you what they say because it's very interesting. So they say the Prima Godim explains what I've just said to you now.
This is all Mishna, Brura, not Shulchan Aruch.
Shulchan Aruch doesn't speak about the fingernails in that, and that's the Mishnah Brura. So the Jewish notes say it seems in the Mishnah Brura that you first see that and then you say the bracha. This was the Brisker Rav's custom and the Stipler Gaon's custom, and that's what they write. However, the Chazon Ish would first look at the bracha, and first say the bracha, and then look. And why did he say that? He said that was what my father did. And in Rav Moshe Feinstein, he says that's the minhag haolam. That's what people do. So it seems to be an example of a situation where if you would ask what's technically correct, it would seem it's technically correct if you look at the fingers. But if you want to say what's done, what do people do? Now, if I were to look at it from a purely academic perspective, I would say because for the Basamim we get used to saying the bracha first, that kind of carried across. For the wine we say it first, for the Basamim we say it first. So it's like, how could it end up differently?
But the Briskers would have carried that down, right? No?
One would think so, yeah. But that's an interesting one. And again, unless you want to say that's a bracha of enjoyment, which it could be. See, I'd understood that it was because the explanation they give is that fire was created on Saturday night. So that is when we get benefit from fire. But you can say, no, it's not that we're getting...
Given us fire.
Sorry? That's it. So it's a praise for giving us fire, not a bracha of enjoyment or benefit from the fire. So you could debate that. Then we have... Let's think what else. Okay, next. Everyone heard Havdalah, it's shul, but they didn't have intention for that Havdalah. Then you got to make Havdalah again. And this is where I actually mentioned this in shul this evening. This is where you see a difference between the Kiddush we do in shul and the Havdalah we do in shul. The Kiddush we do in shul is a fake Kiddush. The Havdalah we do in shul is a real Havdalah. If you have intention for that Havdalah, then that goes through. So the Havdalah must be made according to Halakha. Always tell the Stikals here and Nadia and the kids are here as well. So we'll ask Malcolm to make Havdalah, because then they make Havdalah and they're not gonna make just like that. Some argue. Therefore, says the Ramor, they should not make Havdalah for themselves. We'll come back to that in a second. Rather, they should hear Havdalah from a man. Okay, now firstly, we know the idea of disparity in obligation. If two people have the same level of obligation, they can fulfill the mitzvah for one another. If one has more of an obligation than the other, then only the one with more of an obligation can fulfill the mitzvah for both, and the one with less of an obligation can't fulfill for the one with more. So when it comes to Havdalah, a man can make Havdalah for a woman because he definitely needs to make Havdalah. A woman can't make Havdalah for a man because she may not need to make Havdalah. So then we see that that's pretty clear. Women can't make Havdalah for themselves. That's more tricky. Why couldn't they make it? Because they've all got the same level. They either have or they haven't. Right? Whatever the suffix is, that applies to all of them. Yeah. So, and the Bach actually asks a stronger question. He says, listen, even if they don't have an obligation, we find that they're allowed to take lulav and etrog. They're allowed to listen to shofar. So, what should the problem be? There doesn't seem to be a custom that women don't drink the Havdalah wine. So that's what I think the Magan says. He says, well, can't drink the Havdalah wine, so how are they supposed to make Havdalah? So that's what he says. So that's why, even though there are more things to say, okay, man, I would maybe want to read. Okay, but he wants to say that's why they shouldn't do it. It's because they can't drink the cup. But obviously, if there's no men around, then they can. Okay, I would have said that what the Ramah mean they shouldn't make for men, which clearly would follow, but he doesn't actually say that. What can I tell you? What does the world do? As far as I know, women make for themselves. Women make for themselves, and even like on a girls' Shabbaton or whatever, even if there is a rabbi or two, often the girls will have their own Havdalah ceremony where they can sing and this and that, whatever else. And they don't say, no, we have to have the rabbi doing it, as far as I know. So that's an interesting one, because again, that makes sense. The only real issue is drinking the wine, which maybe you could work it out. And it says that's the custom that they don't, so it might not always be. And then the other thing is, this is very interesting what the Mishnah Brura says. If a man ate or listened with intention, and then he came home, he can make Havdalah for other men, no problem. Or he can even make Havdalah for boys. But if the only one who hasn't had Havdalah is his wife, then that's somewhat of an issue, because perhaps she's not obligated in Havdalah, and therefore it could be that he's making a bracha levatala. So some say that he shouldn't make Havdalah in such a case. And he brings, look, there are those who say that it's justified, but he says, but why should he bring himself into such a situation if she could simply make Havdalah for herself? Yeah, and basically that seems to be that she should say, in such a case, if a man has made Havdalah for himself, the wife should make her own Havdalah. He shouldn't make a second Havdalah for her. He can make a second Havdalah for other men, but he shouldn't make a second Havdalah for her. She can make her own Havdalah. That's how it seems to be. Next one is chapter 297, Reish 297, laws of Basamim. You make the bracha on Basamim if you have. If you don't have, then don't go run around after them. Now, the Mishnah Brura says something very interesting. What bracha do we say on the Basamim? Borei minei Basamim. He says that doesn't matter what you're saying it over. Even though during the week we distinguish between the different brachot of smells, like we spoke about yesterday, Borei isvei Basamim, Borei atzei Basamim. For Motzei Shabbat, minei Basamim. Why? Because otherwise it's going to get very confusing for everyone. Everyone comes to shul and they see that we're making a bracha on the cinnamon, so we say Borei atzei Basamim. And then the next week they come, then they go home and they're making the bracha on lemongrass. So they'll say Borei atzei Basamim. It doesn't work. Borei minei Basamim is the shehakol of smelling brachas. It covers everything. And so that's at least that everyone will look for it. Mim, you don't use mim from the lavatory, or basamim that was used for the deceased. That's made to not smell bad. We had that when we spoke about the brachas of smells. Exactly. You don't say the bracha of the camouflage. Say the bracha of something that's actually there for a nice smell. So I think you could use that to differentiate eau de cologne from deodorant. It's even the name, odor cologne. Okay. So then he speaks a little bit about that. Then he says, don't make, you don't use spices from parties of Avodah Zarah because, they probably have some connection to idol worship. And if you did use those spices, adds the Ramor, then it's no good. You actually use other, you say that didn't even count for a bracha. You're going to find other spices and you say the bracha. Bags that are full of spices, that are used for spicing non-kosher wine. You are allowed to smell them, but don't make havdalah over them, because it's not considered like benefiting from this non-kosher wine. The Mishna Brura explains, what does he mean hadas? It means of a lulav. Save the hadas from your lulav bundle. And the idea is that once it was used for one mitzvah, you should use it for another mitzvah. That's all year round, but you can't use it because probably is where people get the custom of using the etrog. Fill the etrog with cloves, and use that. So once you used it for a mitzvah, that I would say is the main Jewish view. Maybe it doesn't sound right to me. The main Jewish view on recycling is not about recycling paper, but about recycling mitzvah articles. To maintain, keep the holiness. Don't, throw it away. Once it's done for a mitzvah, find another mitzvah. Even with broken tzitzit, they say try to use it as a bookmark, or something like that. Okay, and then he said, what does it mean whenever it's possible? If it still has it, and in fact, it's this is what the Zohar says as well, he quotes, and we find that in the Haftorah that we read on fast days, Tachat hasirpadi ale hadas. Hadas will rise ascendant. So we use that. Then so that's what we say. However, the Ramor says, some say don't make the bracha on dried hadas. That doesn't smell so nice. Just make it on others. And in fact, that's our custom in these countries. It seems to me that you can put hadas together with other spices, because then everyone. So for a few weeks after Sukkot, probably you could do it. And then after that, if you or if you have somebody who doesn't know the bracha. But if you yourself can't smell and you have other adults around, don't say the Mishna Brura says no, that's not actually true. Only not for the other people. You say the bracha for them if you yourself aren't smelling it. It's like I can't say bracha. Okay. Mishna Brura goes into a discussion about that. That's that chapter. Now we're on to 2. The way that's spelt is not Reish Tzadi Chet, which would be Retzach, murder. It's Reish Chet Tzadi, Rachatz, washing. The laws of the candle for Havdalah. You say the bracha handle Borei Morei Ha'esh if you have, and you don't need to go around looking for it. So with both the spices and the candle, that's the right way to do it. But I guess even if you're going away for Shabbos, if you're packing for what to take, it's good to pack. If you didn't, you forgot, you find yourself, whatever, it's not something you need to go out to the shops. This is on Motzei Shabbos. However, after Yom Kippur, some say that you do actually need to go out and get. Some say on Yom Kippur you do actually need to go out and get. He doesn't explain why. Also, the Mishna Brura points out that you only say that Borei Morei Ha'esh if you're doing Havdalah on Saturday night, because that's when fire was created. If you're doing it Sunday morning, you didn't have the cup Saturday night, whatever, so you do it started after Tisha B'Av, and you're doing it Sunday night, then you wouldn't. Then the Ramor says somebody who does not have a cup for Havdalah, doesn't have wine for Havdalah, when you see the fire, you'll still say the bracha of Borei Morei Ha'esh, and so too on Besamim. So ideally, we do them all together, but in theory, you could. In theory, they still exist as separate things. Okay. Then next halacha, the ideal mitzvah is to make the bracha over a torch. Some say if you don't have a torch, you need to light another candle for the needs of Havdalah, except for, besides for the main candle. And in other, it seems like two candles next to one another. The Ramo says Shulchan is saying that this is it's a hidur. Why is it a hidur? Because it's brighter. Also, the Mishnah Brura says that this shows that you're doing it for a mitzvah. If you're just lighting one candle, I mean, it's just because you want the lights on. No, you're doing two, then it shows that your intention is to do it for a mitzvah. Yeah, now let's think what else he says. So it's better to use a wax candle if you can, I guess, instead of oil. Then he also says you shouldn't use a certain kind of wood, which doesn't smell very nice. Okay. For an extra mitzvah, if you can. Then he can to look at the nails of your right hand, your left hand, fall into the hand. Then you see the nails and the palms at once. And you don't see the inside of the fingers. Okay, so that's what you always see people doing. That's what he advises that you do. Now, the Mishnah Brura explains on this that we want to recognize in the light between one coin and another. In other words, that you're actually seeing the effect of the light, and therefore we look at the fingernails to see if you can recognize, one thing from another, just like you can recognize between the nail and the skin. That's what you get from looking at the nail. Again, there's a technical thing. There's all these Kabbalistic things I want to say. The technical thing is, if you can tell the difference between the nail and the skin, then that's bright enough that you could tell the difference between a 2 Rand coin and a 5 Rand coin. So therefore, okay, he says, furthermore, the nails are a sign of bracha. Because growing. Even when you stop growing taller, your nails keep growing. Also, we look at the palms, because that is a sign of bracha. So again, we're bringing in this idea that Havdalah is not just a mitzvah. Why, if you said you fold them in, that's the four above the thumb. In other words, you have to fold in your thumb. 4 fingers above the thumb. And then you see those two. Some say that you should see it like that, and then turn it around and see it like that. Okay. Then the Shulchan Aruch continues. You only say the bracha on the candle when it's really burning brightly. No, you only say the bracha on the candle when you get benefit from the light. In other words, that you're close enough that you would be able to distinguish between one currency and another currency, right? The coin and the coin, like we saw. Now, that's why people often switch off the lights, which makes it look, if you've got all the lights on, how are you getting benefit from the candles? However, as a yeshiva, we never used to do it. And I remember always guys who'd been here or been there or at home, they'd do it, whatever, and they'd move around that. And one of the older guys would say, we don't do that here. Rabbi Golf was never around for Havdalah. Rabbi Golf had apparently said in the early years, we don't switch off the lights for Havdalah. So not everyone does. I don't do it at home. But that's true, that's what we do. And again, makes a lot of sense to do it. Next halacha. You don't say the bracha on a candle that was active on Shabbos. In other words, if a candle was lit for a sick person, unless it was lit for a sick person. If it was lit for a, that's fine. But if it was lit, even by someone who's not Jewish, that's a problem, because it's like this candle was working on Shabbos and not to save a life, right? We don't want a candle that was working on Shabbos. And you don't say the bracha on candles of idol worship. Now, I presume what he means by that is that you would have guys who would want to buy the used candles from the church at a discount, and want to use those for Havdalah. He's saying, no, you can't do that. If a non-Jew lit the candles, or a Jew lit it from a non-Jew's candles, that's fine. But if a non-Jew lit it from a non-Jew's candles, then you can't use it. Why? Because the first ones were lit on Shabbat. So the first non-Jew lit his candles on Shabbat. The second non-Jew lit those candles on the first candle. So you're still connected to the problem, to the candles that didn't break. Okay. We don't deal with that. I mean, we've got matches, so it's not such a. Now, after Yom Kippur, you use a candle that even if a Jew lit from a non-Jew, you can't use such a candle. There's different criteria, different standards for Yom Kippur. Now, there's another thing with Yom Kippur. I don't think he's mentioned it here. It's probably mentioned Yom Kippur. The Yom Kippur, we use a candle that was lit the whole of Yom Kippur. You don't just light new candles now. You take a Yotzah candle that you lit before Yom Kippur. But presumably we'll get to that with the laws of Yom Kippur. Okay, you were walking outside of the city and you saw light. If it's a mostly Jewish city, you don't say the bracha. So if it's a mostly non-Jewish city, you don't say the bracha. If it's a mostly Jewish city, or 50-50, you do say the bracha. Why? Because I guess it's a question of whether you assume that it was lit on Shabbos or not. That's what I would think. Okay. Yeah. If you have fire that comes from stones and flint, stones and wood, right? Like flint and whatever. Can you say such a bracha? Yes, but not again on not after Yom Kippur. There we go. So they explain with Yom Kippur, because with Yom Kippur, the whole day you were not allowed to use fire, and now you're allowed to use fire. Therefore, you should only make the bracha on fire that rested. In other words, it was lit from before, and it rested the whole of Yom Kippur. That we weren't allowed to use it, and now we weren't allowed to light it, and now we're allowed to. See, on Shabbos, we make Havdalah with the candle because Saturday night was when fire was created. But on Yom Kippur, when we make Havdalah, what's a candle? Why would we use a candle? We don't do it after Sukkot or Pesach, whatever else. Now, Yom Kippur, it's a different thing. Yom Kippur is this. On Pesach, you can use fire, cook and whatever. It's Yom Kippur, because you couldn't use fire, therefore we light fire and have fire on what's Yom Kippur. Not because that's when it was created. So that's why you need something else. Saturday night, however you get the fire, it's fire time. So we say the bracha. With Yom Kippur, there was fire that we couldn't use, and this is the fire we couldn't use, and now we could use it. We're saying the bracha on it. Okay, there we go. Explain it here. If glowing coals are so hot that they could ignite, these bricks are hot, you don't say the bracha, because that's not made for illumination. Okay. The candle depends on why we have this candle in shul. If it's there in order to burn or whatever else, then that's one thing. Sometimes we light the candle because we want light in the shul to fulfill the functions of the shul. The candle that's there out of honor for Hashem, you don't say the bracha on. The candle that's there used in the shul, you say the bracha. So that's what an important person will go out of our will spend money to light the candles for them. For the regular folks, we're not going to spend the money, right? Unless you paid up your extra shul memberships and whatever. So if there's an important person, then we can say the bracha on that candle. Or the shamus is going to eat there, so then we can say the bracha on the candle. But if the moon is, if there's the moon, you don't say the bracha over the candle lit for the deceased, because again, that's not for illumination. So therefore, you're walking out Saturday night. You're walking down the road after Shabbos, and you see the funeral procession coming through with the candle. You don't say the bracha over that candle. A blind person does not say the bracha, because you need to benefit from it to be able to distinguish between coins. Yeah, that's how he said it. The rest of Havdalah, obviously, he says, people were sitting in the Beit Midrash, and someone brought in a candle. One of them says the bracha for all of them, even though all of them need to hear the. So they've already made Havdalah, but they never had a candle at the time of Havdalah. This is what he says. Okay. And why is one of them saying the bracha for all of them? Because it's this rule we've seen before, Barov Am Hadrat Melech, with many people, that's glory to the king. It's generally better to perform mitzvahs as one big group than as a dozen isolated individuals. Good. Then he says, if you have some kind of torch or flame where you can see the flame, but you can't use the light, or you can use the light, but you can't see the flame, you don't say the bracha. You only say the bracha if you can both see the light and see the flame and use the light. Good. Next chapter, 299. To not eat or do any malacha before Havdalah. Not allowed to eat anything, even to drink wine or other beverages, except water, from when it gets dark until you make Havdalah. However, if you were sitting and eating while it was still day and then it got dark, you don't need to stop. However, if you were sitting and drinking and then it got dark, you do need to stop. Some say this is when it's maybe dark, but when it's definitely dark, then you actually would need to stop even eating. But the custom says the Ramah is like the first opinion. If you're eating, you can carry on eating until you get to make Havdalah, finish your meal and then make Havdalah. But if you're drinking, you have to stop from when maybe it's dark in order to make Havdalah. Okay, so the Mishnah Brura says, what's this time? This time is from sunset. From sunset, you've got to stop. Now, what about when it comes to Sudah Shlishet? Well, if you have Shlishet, that's a real obligation. So you should wash and start eating even though it's after sunset. And the truth is, if you're hungry generally, you don't have to be strict until a half an hour before 3 stars. So for us, the timeline is not so distinct. I mean, sunset it probably is around a half an hour before 3 stars. When we had candle lighting now, it's around 5:45, which means 3 stars a few minutes after 6, and Shabbos out 6:44. So we're talking a 10-minute difference between sunset and half an hour before 3 stars. Okay. If you daven Ma'ariv, then you can't eat at all because now you've already consider and eat. Even if you just made hamotzi, that's fine. What we're talking about with eating. He just says, he speaks about the difference between eating and drinking. If you're drinking, you should stop. But if you're eating, you can carry on. So the question is, what kind of eating, what kind of drinking? The main question is, what if you didn't wash? If you didn't wash, are you allowed to carry? heard, or maybe even saw, is that only if you washed are you allowed to carry on eating. But yeah, on this one way there, it's quite important because not everyone wants to wash for Suda Shlishet. So it's a question of, do you have to stop or not? Let's see if they mention anything in the Dirshu notes. Okay, so I'm not seeing anything. We'll bear that in mind. Maybe it'll can. Then he says in the next halacha, if they were busy drinking and somebody said, let's go make Havdalah, if you want to go back and carry on drinking, you don't need to say a new bracha. So you go make Havdalah, you say a new bracha over the wine. However, that's an argument. Okay. If you have Havdalah on this cup of wine, but he drinking it. Okay. But these are not common cases. And it got dark. Here we go. And they said you don't have to stop. So you finish your meal, then you say Birkat Hamazon over the cup of wine, and then you do Havdalah over that cup of wine. If you've got 2 cups, you say Birkat Hamazon over one, and you make Havdalah over the other. Now you're allowed to drink from that cup for Birkat Hamazon, even though it's before Havdalah, because that really is part of the previous meal. But that only applies to somebody who always makes Birkat Hamazon over a cup. But somebody who sometimes does without a cup, so then you can't drink this now. Then it's not really part of your meal. Then you leave it. So that's what we do. We don't drink that one at Sudan. So just make Havdalah afterwards. If you forgot to make Havdalah Motzei Shabbat, you can make Havdalah the end of Tuesday afternoon. Some say that you only make Havdalah, and you would only say Borei Pragafen Mavdil Ben B'Shlachol. You wouldn't use the candle, you wouldn't use Pesamim, Saturday night. But if you if you already ate and now it's Sunday morning, some say now you've definitely lost your chance. In other words, one or the other. On Saturday night, you can make the whole time even if you ate. And you can make on Sunday if you didn't eat. But if you ate and it's Sunday, then you can't anymore. That's what some say. Can't make Havdalah anymore. That's this opinion. There's 2 opinions. The one opinion is you've always got until Tuesday afternoon. The other opinion, and even if you ate, the other opinion is no. 2 strikes and you're out. If it's not Saturday night and you haven't eaten, you can still make. If you've eaten and it's still Saturday night, you can still make. But if you've eaten and it's not Saturday night, then you can't. The Ramo says the main thing is like the first opinion. Even with 2 strikes, you can still make your Havdalah. Some people fast for 3 days and 3 nights. So they do fasting Saturday night, Sunday night, Monday night, Tuesday. Now Tuesday night, how are they supposed to make Havdalah? It's already too late. In such a case, let's bat and drink the wine, obviously without the candle and whatever, and accept the fast, for when Shabbat ends. Now, how exactly that works, maybe we'll see that next time.
Getting complicated.